This is Gone at 21, Katelyn Markham's Death Investigation, Episode 1 of the investigation. Before we get started with this episode, I want to tell you about another podcast, Accused, that took place in Butler County, Ohio, just like the Katelyn Markham case. Cincinnati journalist Amber Hunt looks into the 1978 murder of Elizabeth Andes and the man that was accused, tried, and acquitted of that murder. So after you listen to Gone at 21, if you haven't already listened to Accused, go check it out. It's worth a listen. In October of 2014, I received an email from a man who wanted to meet with me and get my thoughts on an unsolved homicide. He did inform me in his email that the case was about 3 years old. I emailed him back and we met at a local barbecue restaurant. And that's where he told me about the Katelyn Markham case and the fact that it was in Ohio. What? I assumed this was a local case. I was somewhat taken back, and I wasn't expecting the case to be 1,000 miles away, so I wanted to see how serious he was. I told him how much I charged per hour, and he didn't bat an eye. I went a little further. I told him how long a case like this could take and how much money he might be spending. Again, not much shock on his face. I also told this prospective client I didn't want to get involved unless I could take it all the way, or at least as far as I could. A lot of people hire PIs with the intent of gaining specific information on a case, then dropping the PI after they obtain that information. I knew if I took the case, I would be making at least one trip to Ohio. And if I'm going to Ohio, I want to finish the case. Not just getting specific information and then get booted by the client. In other words, I wanted him to know my condition on taking this case was going to mean a long-term investment from him. I also conveyed to the potential client I didn't want to get to the end of the case and have evidence and a suspect only to be told he didn't want to spend any more money on it. His response? That's not going to happen. I'm in it until the end. That was good enough for me. Looking back, maybe I should have got it in writing. I wanted to have at least 1 month for research and time to speak to law enforcement and witnesses or people close to the case before I could gauge how productive I could be. But I also wanted time to look at the case before entering into a long-term contract. His response? I want you to start. You're the one I want to investigate this case. He then took out his checkbook. Let me tell you, that speaks volumes. He was serious. He asked me to make the contract out in his name and wanted to pay me to do an initial review. So, the investigation began. After I took time to look at the case, I felt I needed to speak to some people close to Katelyn Markham and her fiancé John Carter. And I also wanted to speak to law enforcement. I wanted to identify how the case was investigated and try to detect if there were any holes or evidence that were overlooked. If law enforcement conducted a good initial investigation and continued with follow-up interviews and evidence gathering, then I would probably be wasting my time with an independent investigation. But if the law enforcement investigation was sloppy and steps were skipped, I could be an asset and an independent investigation would be warranted. The client seemed to think that the law enforcement investigation was inept. He gave me several examples, but I needed to find out if these claims were true before I stepped in too far. So I contacted the Markham family friend who was the liaison between David Markham and the police and the media. We will refer to her as Tammy for this podcast. Tammy told me about friends that may have more information on what happened to Katelyn, but she refused to give me their contact information. She mentioned that she would contact these friends of Katelyn and John's and have them get in touch with me. Tammy had strong opinions about the Fairfield Police Department, none of which were good. She told me the police were protecting John because his family knew some administrators at the police department. And by the way, those claims have not been substantiated. Tammy also claimed that the Fairfield Police Department didn't even process or secure Katelyn's townhome for days after she was reported missing. My first reaction to this was that of shock. When law enforcement arrive at a scene or a possible scene, there are 3 routine things they do. Now, this is proper police procedure. Number 1, render aid. If no one's hurt, you simply skip this step. Number 2, secure the crime scene or possible crime scene. And number 3, canvass the area for evidence and witnesses, i.e., in this case, speak to the neighbors. There is no reason that this, a possible crime scene, should not have been secured at minimum. Katelyn's friends and family didn't know where she was, and her purse, her keys, her car were at her townhouse. So all the essentials she needs to live are at her townhouse, besides her cell phone. And the police find it not important enough to secure or even process the scene that night. This piece of information alone, in my opinion, would warrant an independent investigation. Tammy also told me that John Carter was seen washing his car in the early morning hours of August 14, 2011. That claim could never be confirmed because Tammy refused to give me the name of the individual that gave her the information. So, we're getting off to a great start here with Tammy. She did, however, encourage me to talk to Detective Vance Patton of the Indiana State Police and to not deal with Fairfield PD. So, I contacted Vance Patton, and we had about an hour conversation, and I can tell you he was very helpful and informative. About a month goes by, I learned that Tammy still hasn't contacted the friends that she was going to have speak with me. And I decided that I was just going to look the phone numbers up myself. I looked up Ashley Griggs, the friend of Katelyn and John's that Tammy spoke most about. Tammy warned me that Ashley had a substance problem and wasn't sure if she was using again or not. And by the way, Ashley never tried to hide this from me or anybody else. She's pretty open with her struggle with drugs. So after getting a hold of Ashley, she explained some of Katelyn's frustrations in planning a trip with John to Colorado. This was a week or two before Katelyn disappeared.
One thing I did bring up to the detectives is Katelyn had this binder that she carried around with her for her strictly planning this trip to Colorado. She always had it with her. Mm-hmm. And on the front of it, it had this clear thing where you could slide in a paper, and inside that clear thing was a map of Colorado, and she was mapping out the route and, like, putting on the pinpoints, like, where a David's Bridal was in Colorado, and, you know, was taking it very seriously. Well, John wasn't taking it very seriously, wasn't helping her plan it. This was the last time I saw her, and the last fight that I remember them getting into. She was sitting there on his cell phone at my house at the time, and she had her binder in her lap, and she's sitting here, you know, trying to ask John questions, and he's just not having any interest in it at all, and she's getting really frustrated with it, to where she shuts down. She's completely quiet the whole time. She doesn't want to socialize anymore, and, you know, I asked her what was wrong, and she told me, like, I'm just getting really frustrated because I'm trying to plan this trip, and, you know, he's not taking it seriously. He's just kind of wanting to go with the flow of things, and we can't do that. Like, I'm putting my whole life on the line and moving, and, you know, he's not taking it seriously.
There was a search party approximately 48 hours after Katelyn was discovered missing. Ashley explains what she witnessed at the search party.
I couldn't find a ride there, and the person that offered to take me was Matt Rocamp, which is one of John Carter's very good friends. And we showed up there, and I don't know, at first John, you know, he seemed a little frazzled and, you know, anxious, and that was fine. And he wanted to stay next to me the whole time we were searching.
John did?
And yeah, and we're walking along, and like, we'd be walking, and he'd just break down and start crying, and he'd keep picking up his cell phone, and trying to call Katelyn's cell phone, because when you would call Katelyn's cell phone, it would still ring. And this went on for about a week or two, that her cell phone acted like it was still on. So while we were out searching, he'd just start bawling, and then all of a sudden try to call her cell phone, and, you know, make sure you stay next to me, you know, I don't want to be by myself. And just a few strange things, like the EMTs came, and, you know, they were just volunteering to bring us all water, and he opened up to one of them, and they just told him to pray, and he's like, you know, right now I don't really believe in God, and blah, 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 and, you know, just a lot of really weird stuff, just opening up to the EMT about it and saying he doesn't believe in God, and just, I couldn't stay much longer. I actually ended up getting sick because it was the first search party, and having to miss the hospital because I got dehydrated, and finding out I was pregnant that day. But yeah, that's about all that I experienced. I felt really uncomfortable because our search area, everybody was spread out into different groups, and our area was John's neighborhood and Katelyn's neighborhood because they lived right by each other. And I just didn't, I don't know, I don't tell many people this, but I didn't think it was right to put John in that area.
Ashley then shocked me when she told me about an exchange her and John Carter had just several days after Katelyn was discovered missing. And it starts off by Ashley describing what John said that he was going to do for her and her unborn child.
He said that he wanted to step in and help me take care of it, and at this point there was no concern for him to say that. He had said that he would take me to doctor's appointments, and that he had always wanted to be with me. And I mean, this could be hearsay, but, you know, I'm not the first girl he made comments like this to.
Wait, hang on a second. Let's go back.
Yeah.
This was at the first search party for his girlfriend who had been missing, what, 2 days, 3 days maybe?
Yeah, it was after the search party. I called him after the search party because I didn't know I was pregnant until I went to the hospital.
Okay.
So I was just really sick at the search party. I had no idea at that point what it was. But yeah, it was pretty shortly, yeah, after she had been missing.
So, how many days after the first search party did you call him and tell him that you were pregnant?
2 or 3 days.
All right, and tell me how that conversation went from, like, start to end.
It started with, you know, I was freaking out. I was crying, you know. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't have many girlfriends to discuss this with. Like, I'm panicking. And, he actually had came over, and the father of the child was there at the time, and so was my boyfriend's brother. Well, when they stepped outside, that's when John started to pursue the conversation. It wasn't on the phone. It was face-to-face, and he waited for them to go outside to do it, and I got really uncomfortable. And he put his hand on my knee, and that's when he started telling me, you know, you don't have to be scared. I'll help you take care of the baby in any way, and I'll take you to your doctor's appointments. And you know I've always liked you, Ashley. You would never give me a chance and stuff like that. And then when I confronted him about it, he tried to play it off like, I'm just trying to be a good friend because that's what Katelyn would want, stuff like that.
That encounter wasn't the last. John continues to pursue Ashley a couple months later, and, allegedly, a couple more of Katelyn's friends.
He did suggest later on down the road, when I was a little further along pregnant, that maybe I should leave my boyfriend. Because my boyfriend at the time was having trouble, coming to terms with me being pregnant. He was in shock, and we weren't getting along very well. And John did insist leaving him and that he would step in as the father figure.
But did he mention not just father figure, he wanted to be with you as well at that later date?
Yes.
What did he say to that effect?
I got more specific. I told him that made me really uncomfortable, that Katelyn was my friend, and, that I had no interest in leaving the father of my child. And then again, he started brushing it off like that wasn't what he meant. Anytime I would confront him about how uncomfortable I was about this, he would say, "Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Please don't take it that way."
So, how did he put it about leaving your boyfriend? Tell me how he specifically said it.
He said, well, if you were to break up with Zach, I would be here and, we could finally give it a go.
Ashley, how long was this after the first search party was?
After the first search party. So I found out in August that I was pregnant. So this would have had to have been 2 months after.
So they haven't even found Katelyn's body yet, and he's trying to get with another woman. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I don't know if it's my place to say, but I'm not the first girl that he had tried to get with in that span of time.
Who else was he trying to get with?
Amber Morgan, which was one of Katelyn's best friends, and Heather Hapney.
Hapney?
Hapney, Hapney.
Heather Hapney, one of the women Ashley said John came on to shortly after Katelyn went missing, is a very good friend of John's and has been for a long time. She strongly defends John's innocence and refuses to believe John had anything to do with Katelyn's death. Before getting into some important information about Heather's interview, I want to address what Ashley said about John coming on to her. Please take note that Heather refers to John Carter as Johnny C.
Johnny C and I would have ever gotten together would have been a long time ago.
So you're saying he didn't come on to you or say anything to you?
Lord, no.
Okay.
No, he was ripped up about Katelyn, and Johnny C's never been one of those like, I'm a Superman, manly man.
Heather offered me a possible lead. Her boyfriend and youngest son's father, Ryan Isaacs, was living with a man named Leonard, who told him about a possible incident that occurred and claimed he witnessed. Here is Heather explaining what Ryan told her, but before we get into that clip, please know that both Heather and Ryan have admittedly had their struggles with drugs and are fully familiar with the drug culture and characters involved in that culture in the Fairfield area. Heather was sick at the time of this interview. She is hard to understand, but all efforts to make this clip audible have been taken.
I was pregnant at the time. My son's father was living with a friend, and Katelyn's name somehow got brought about. And pretty much in a nutshell was that some of the people Katelyn started hanging out with were on drugs. And I'm assuming heroin. And, cause that's what the guy was
was on, and his buddy or whatever, and something like, once Johnny C had left, or she had some people over or something, and she was trying to get him out of the house, and they came over, and they went to get high, and something like, they had, given her these drugs, she OD'd and freaked out and dragged her away somewhere, something of that nature. It's a little far-fetched, but I do, know some of one of her, really good friends that has been on drugs.
What is your baby's dad's name?
Ryan Isaacs, Isaacs. He's going to be mad at me, but I don't really care.
After hearing this information, my next interview was with Ryan Isaacs, obviously. Let's listen to the story Ryan shares about what his roommate Leonard said about Katelyn's death.
Okay, so originally, Katelyn disappears, and everybody's all lost, doesn't know what's going on, such a nice girl, doesn't have any problems in life. Well, a couple, maybe 2 weeks after that, the guy I'm living with, Leonard, we get to talking about it, and he says, man, I've been thinking about it, and I don't want to open my mouth, but, somebody told me that this person we both knew, I swear I can't remember who it was still, because it's been so long now, but we both knew him as a mutual friend, said that, they were there. And I'm like, so you're hearing, at this point it's hearsay. I've heard it from this person, we've heard it from this person. And, he's like, they were there, and she, her friend talked her into doing some heroin, and she fell out. And then, that's probably how it went down. And this is 2 weeks after it happened at the most. So but it's hearsay, so I don't think anything of it. A little while later, we get to talking about it again, and he's like, look, man, I didn't want to say nothing at first. And I was like, bro, just, keep it real with me. We're cool, we're roommates, we can talk about things. It's okay. I've known the guy since we were kids. I might, it's how it is. And he comes at me, and he's like, man, I was there, bro. I saw her fall out. She did this heroin, and then, like I said, it was a mutual friend. God, I wish I remember who it was. It was a female. I can't remember for the life of me who it was, though, right now. If I talk to him, I'll call you back and let you know. But he tells me he was there. He saw it with his own two eyes. He saw Katelyn was persuaded by a mutual friend. She was having a rough time. I guess her and John were going to move in together or something crazy, and it was a big life change. They were trying to get their life to the next step, and she was all stressed out, and her friend talked her into doing some heroin, and, on the premise that it would be, it'll take care of your problems right this minute, take the stress off for a minute kind of thing. And I guess as far as Leonard told me, he was there, he saw it with his own two eyes, she fell out right there, but he got scared and left, and in talking to our mutual friend, they said, she didn't make it, and he was like, look, don't tell me no more, and that was the end of the story from his point of view that I ever heard, and I didn't follow up, which I probably should have, but I just, different time in my life, different set of values. But, that's as far as I remember right off the top of my head, but I'll certainly go find the rest of the story for you, man. It's been so long now, though, that I'm a little lost right this minute.
If you heard the name, would you recognize it?
Very possible. Very possible.
Okay, I'm just gonna name down Amber.
No.
Mary.
That's who I wanted to say. I think it was Mary, who was a mutual friend of Leonard, me, and Katelyn. And there's not a whole lot of them because we all come from different circles. It was on the tip of my tongue, but I don't want to just throw somebody's name on there, not positive, you know what I mean?
Right. This is a lead. No matter how unlikely people that know Katelyn think this claim is, it must be followed up on. Although, I'm sure the police have already investigated this, right? Well, maybe not. I asked Heather and Ryan if they spoke to police, and here's their answer. Has anybody contacted you in reference to this case, the police or anybody?
No. No. I interviewed with some reporter one time. I don't believe they ever put it on, because I'm not sure why. But anyway, they never put it on, but that's it. And
Tell me.
I'm not sure why, because me and John have been friends. Besides his best friend Matthew Rokamp, I mean, I've been there since then. You know what I'm saying?
Ryan, I had one more question to ask you.
Certainly.
Has anybody contacted you from either police department, Indiana or Fairfield, or any other private investigator? Have they contacted you in reference to this incident?
Nobody that's of anyone other than my circle of friends has not talked to me at all. Never. No police, no investigators, nobody.
Okay. So the police didn't interview Heather or Ryan. This is going on about 3.5 years after Katelyn's disappearance. Karen Winkler, John Carter's mom, also told me when she spoke to Heather was wondering when the police were going to speak to her. Heather was at John's side for several months after Katelyn disappeared. She even went to a couple of counseling sessions with John. Not to mention, they had been friends for many years before that, and Heather was considered a part of John and Katelyn's inner circle. Heather called me back a couple hours after these interviews and mentioned Katelyn had a severe reaction to psychedelic mushrooms, or shrooms, a couple years prior to her disappearance. David Markham confirmed he heard the same thing. Katelyn did use shrooms after that incident, according to John and several other friends, without any issues. One interesting fact, when Ashley Griggs was interviewed by the police, the detective asked Ashley who would Katelyn go with if they showed up at her house late at night or early in the morning. Ashley named both Heather and Ryan, yet they were not interviewed. I need to make this clear. Ashley was only asked about friends that Katelyn would go with or let in her home, not who she thought was responsible for Katelyn's disappearance. Katelyn was just missing at this point. I confirmed Ashley was in fact asked these questions by law enforcement. So after hearing about police not securing or processing Katelyn's house for several days, and this information that police haven't interviewed everybody in John and Katelyn's circle, I came to the conclusion that I believe that I could be of some assistance. Little did I know that was just the tip of the iceberg. We heard Ryan Isaacs speak about his friend Leonard describing a female friend helping Katelyn shoot up just before she supposedly OD'd. To get a little more insight into someone new using a drug like heroin, I asked Ashley.
Oh, they would definitely help them with it the first time. Usually most people, addicts, are thinking, when they're doing that, they're going to get them addicted too, and, once that happens, they're going to be bringing them money and, sharing stuff with them, and what better way than shooting them up, because that's the most addicting way to do it and getting them hooked. Okay. And plus, most people just don't know right off the bat. I mean, it's a pretty difficult thing to shoot yourself up.
Now, when I was in law enforcement, I observed what addicts do when someone overdoses while in the presence of other users. Things like leaving the victim where they are or tossing the victim out of a vehicle onto the side of the road. So I asked Ashley about what she has encountered when somebody overdoses.
And a lot of addicts are scared of getting arrested, or that if you take them to emergency room and you take them in there, they're going to get arrested. I mean, you hear about it around here all the time that people overdose. Like a family friend of mine, they just threw him out in the hallway some apartments and let him die until a neighbor had found him out there and it was too late. But yeah, it happens a lot with heroin addicts because that drug numbs you and completely turns your head around and messes you all up, and you just don't give a fuck anymore, basically. It gives you a big dose of fuck it, is what I like to call it. You don't care about anything except for getting high.
This lead or claim was running through my head constantly. I needed to investigate this more, since the police apparently did not, and try to find if this story could lead to what happened to Katelyn Markham. Of course, I needed to speak to Leonard, and since he basically lived on the street going from couch to couch, it wasn't going to be easy getting in touch with him. I asked Ryan to help and also called Leonard's dad and left a message. His dad said he should be stopping by in a couple days and would give him the message. A couple of days later, Leonard called me. He asked me right off the bat if this was about a debt. No, this is not about a debt. I explained to him why I was calling, and I asked him about this claim, and he vividly denied he told Ryan this. And also he said he didn't even know Katelyn. I got Ryan on the phone, and they argued back and forth for a little while, and Leonard said, "I told you it was DJ that saw her fall out." Ryan said, "No, you said you saw it." So the call ended, and I got this feeling that the whole conversation was a setup. If not, Ryan stuck to his guns and called Leonard out. Either way, I needed to find DJ, but neither of them knew his last name. Of course, I figured his last name out, and I looked him up on Facebook, and he is apparently a train hopper, traveling the nation. So it went from a local guy that didn't have a permanent address and slept couch to couch, and now I'm dealing with a guy that's traveling the country hopping trains. That's gonna be fun. I had to ask myself, did Ryan tell me the correct story but took the people who were actually there out, possibly his friends, and inserted people that he knew would be almost impossible for me to track down, knowing I'm in Florida? You see, Ryan didn't know I was coming up to Fairfield at this point. All of Katelyn's friends I spoke to told me that Katelyn and John only did natural drugs like marijuana and shrooms. Mary Holleran, one of John and Katelyn's friends, throws something else in the mix. Did you know Katelyn to do anything else besides weed?
I know that her and John met tripped on mushrooms a few times. I know that they had done acid a few times, but I know that they didn't really like anything that wasn't natural.
You can't go pick acid out in your backyard. You can't grow acid. It's man-made. It might have some natural derivatives in it, but it's made in a lab. So she said she knew that Katelyn and John tried acid, but she knew that they didn't really like to do anything other than natural stuff, which is kind of a contradiction. In order for me to get a clearer picture of the overdose, I had to see if Katelyn had been known to take drugs besides marijuana, which most likely wouldn't cause an overdose. If she had a reaction to psychedelic mushrooms or got a bad batch, that could be possibly a very, very rare possibility. If Katelyn took mushrooms that night, John would have as well. It's reported that he did. John's still alive, and Katelyn had taken shrooms many times after her reaction and was fine. But if she was known to take other drugs or experiment, then there could be a possibility that this lead may be something that needs to be investigated further. Mary Holleran is the woman that Ryan said Leonard pointed to as the one who supposedly shot Katelyn up, ending in an overdose. Mary adamantly denies this claim. While interviewing Mary, she told me about an individual that she knew after Katelyn disappeared who claimed he killed her. The individual's information was passed to the Indiana State Police, who informed Fairfield PD. The person Mary was referring to was in a prison facility about 2 hours north of Fairfield at the time of our interview. It's unknown whether detectives spoke to him. Mary did mention she thought he was just trying to scare her in an attempt to control her. I'm not going to play that audio clip due to certain specifics that are sensitive in nature. So, if Katelyn overdosed, how would this story connect with Cedar Grove, Indiana? Ashley lays that out for me. The geographical location from the park, a hangout with that circle of friends, and Big Cedar Road where Katelyn was found.
Governor Bev Park, which is not far from there, is a very well-known area of all of our friends either. But, you know, and I mean, that area, they had to have known it pretty well too, if she was placed there, or, you know, even if she did wash up there, like, somebody had to know that area, because that's just where she was found. It's just like, I don't know, it's not a known road. There's not much on that road. There's not much around there at all. Somebody had to know where they were going.
Now, this park you're talking about, is it right in that area where she was dumped?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably drive from Governor Bev to where she was found within 5-10 minutes at the most.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I asked a question. Go ahead.
All I was just going to say next was that I know that even before she was found, they were pretty close. I wasn't on, I like to say we, but I wasn't searching at this point. I was very pregnant at this point, and they even searched Governor Bev Park.
Did they?
At one point.
So
somebody had to have led them there. I don't know who, because it wasn't me at the time, because I didn't start adding up all these puzzle pieces until she was found in Indiana, but yeah.
The park is in Ohio or in Indiana?
I don't know if it would be considered Ohio or Indiana, because the part of Indiana that she's found in, like, you literally cross over, like, just the slightest bit from Ohio, and there you are. Like, you could stand there with 1 foot in Ohio and 1 foot in Indiana.
Okay. Just to clarify, Governor Bev Park is in Ohio. In 2011, John Carter's dad had property in Laurel, Indiana, but he lived near State Road 126 in western Butler County. This would be the quickest way to get to Cedar Grove, Indiana, from Fairfield. So, Katelyn was dumped between John Carter's dad's house that he lived in 2011 and property he owned in Laurel, Indiana. I asked Ashley about that property and if she knows if John went there a lot. Hey, did you know John to go to that property a lot in Indiana?
Yes, they even had a birthday party for Katelyn there one year.
Did they? That concludes the first episode of The Investigation. The next episode of Gone at 21 will be coming out February 17th. Evidentiary notes will be coming out Wednesday, February 8th. We will be listening to Brad Von Bargen's interview and his version of what went down that Saturday when Katelyn was last seen. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe and like. If you're listening in iTunes, please also rate and review. If you would like to hear this podcast on a weekly basis, please consider a donation. Just go to the Gone at 21 Facebook page. There you will find a link pinned to the top of the wall. Just press the link and follow the prompts to donate. Any amount you decide to contribute will be greatly appreciated. Until next time, I'm Jay Ryan. Take care.